There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets. And they own all the big media companies, so they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want.
Government by the people, of the people, for the people. But the people are retarded.
The best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, from Charlotte, another line going from in Florida down to Tampa. Of Putin's kleptocracy. Yeah. America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was going to put him. The idea that Los Angeles and what am I doing here? For two reasons. One, let's be clear. I hear it all the time. Cumulative deficit, I can play for the programs many times over.
Well, I'm sick and tired of smart guys.
Let me start off with two words. Made in America. Made in America.
Welcome back to another night of Shtick with Koolfrogg. Such a night. So tired. It was a long day. But I'm going to push through. We'll actually make this work. We'll do what we need to do. And we'll make it a good night. So, let's say hi to everybody real quick. What's up, Daisy Girl? Good to see you. Rabbit. Caitlin. Suzanne. Good to see y'all. I'm glad you're all here. Hey, Rose. How you doing? Moose. Made in a Delaware basement. Yes. Yes. Definitely made in a Delaware basement. If you can all do me a favor, hit that like button before we get going. Let all your friends know where we're at. Come get them to come hang out. Come chat with us. Hang out with us. There is a Rumble side. Anybody that's over there, make sure you hit that thumbs up button for me. Look, I actually picked up a couple of subscribers for followers on the Rumble side in the last few days. That's kind of exciting. Glad you're all there. If you're there, say something. I will actually try talking to you as much as I possibly can. We have a few things going on here. Junteenth was the day. I know it's midnight out on that East Coast or whatever, so it would have been yesterday for some of you, whatever. It's all right. It's all right. I get it. We're still gonna try covering Junteenth for a little, give you a little bit of information that we actually found out today, as well as mosquito-filled drones. Mosquito-filled drones is something to potentially be looking at. It's kind of an interesting thought. And just keep that in mind as we actually make it through this day. And then, missing tourist submarines, really seriously interesting. YouTube is gay and on Submarine. Elephant, how are you doing? Good to see you. Of course, YouTube's gay. YouTube has a tendency to do that. I really seriously hate it. I know there's people that say, oh, YouTube doesn't do that. Yep, yeah, they sure as hell do. They sure as hell do. If you don't actually view a channel within so many days, or you don't interact within so many days, or just about any other plethora of reasons, they have a tendency to just do that. But glad you're here. Glad you're here. Um, so like I said, Juneteenth is the day. I really, I get it. Why it's a national holiday or federal holiday. Uh, Maybe not as much. I just don't quite understand why we need to make it, such a holiday out of it. But, it is what it is. So, we'll try covering it for what we have. I do have some information for you. Um, Here we go. The historical legacy of Juneteenth. On Freedom's Eve, the eve of January 1st, 1863, the first watch night service took place. On that night, enslaved and free African American gathered in churches in private homes all across the country, awaiting news the Emancipation Proclamation had taken effect. At the stroke of midnight, prayers were answered as all enslaved people in Confederate states were declared legally free. Union soldiers, many of whom were black, marched into plantations and across cities in South, reading small copies of Emancipation Proclamation, spreading the news of freedom to Confederate states. Only through the 13th Amendment did emancipation end slavery throughout the United States. But not everyone in Confederate territory would immediately be free. Even though the Emancipation Proclamation was made effective in 1863, it could not be implemented in places still under Confederate control. As a result of the westernmost Confederate states of Texas, enslaved people would not be free until much later. Freedom finally came on June 19th, 1865. That's almost 2.5 years later. When some 2,000 Union troops, Galveston Bay, Texas, the Army announced that the more than 250,000 enslaved black people in the state were free by executive decree. This day came to be known as Juneteenth by the newly freed people in Texas. They couldn't kind of come up with any other better name than Juneteenth? Really? Freedom Day? I mean, the post-emancipation period known as Reconstruction marked an era of great hope, uncertainty, and struggle for a nation as a whole. Formerly enslaved people immediately sought to reunify families, establish schools, run for political office, push radical legislation, even sue slaveholders for compensation. Given the 200 plus years of enslavement, such changes and nothing short of amazing. Not even a generation out of slavery, African Americans were inspired and empowered to transform their lives in their country. Juneteenth marks our country's second Independence Day. Although it was long celebrated in the African American communities as monumental event remains largely unknown to most Americans. The historical legacy of Juneteenth shows the value of never giving up hope in certain times. The National Museum of African American History and Culture is a community space where the spirit of hope lives on, a place where historical events like Juneteenth were shared and new stories with equal urgency are told. So, it's a day that that they like to actually call the day of freedom, for the rest of the country, and mainly Texas, and we know Texas is massively huge. It's there's more Texas than most any other state, uh, in this great union that we live in. Um, I get it. I get it. But they could have called it almost anything else. Juneteenth just sounds ridiculous. What's up? Melissa Jane says just driving. "70 hours of oxygen left." You know, I actually do have an article in here to talk about some of the wildfires that they're actually saying is still actually uh, burning and causing havoc across the United States. We'll get to that eventually. So then Juneteenth threatens American civic traditions. This is an article from today. It says Happy Juneteenth. Today's Americans commemorate the issuing of General Order Number 3 by Major General Gordon Granger in 1865, enforcing the Emancipation Proclamation in Texas, marking a crucial moment in the quest to end slavery across the continental U.S. following the conclusion of the Civil War. In 1980, so a whole bunch of years later, Juneteenth has been recognized as a state holiday in Texas, but more and more states have officially recognized Juneteenth in recent years. Despite most Americans not knowing what it is, powerful institutions have tried to mainstream it. I would almost think across the United States, there's a majority of people that actually do know what it is. It's just that they like to actually push it, the ignorant point of actually saying, "Oh, you don't know what it is." No, we do know what it is. Stop it. Joe Biden's not the first person to actually go ahead and say, "Let's, celebrate Juneteenth." Even Donald Trump himself actually recognized Juneteenth. It is a thing. And a 2021 response to racial animosity from the previous summer of rage, President Joe Biden, that summer of love, uh, President Joe Biden signed the Juneteenth National Independence Day Act into law after it passed both chambers of Congress with overwhelming support. But recognize the ending of black enslavement is not what the federal recognition of Juneteenth is actually about. I really hate how they actually just say it's just black enslavement. It ended enslavement. There were white people that were actually enslaved. It really seriously ridiculous to actually believe that that wasn't a thing. It was. It totally was a thing, and you can't. There's nobody that's gonna argue with me and say, "Oh no, that's not true." It is fucking true. After all, it's not. It is as though anyone in the U.S. is upset slavery was abolished. Black Americans are widely celebrated at every level of American society, but as earlier indicated, Juneteenth simply hasn't caught on. Nevertheless, in an act of leftist intersectional solidarity and conservative cultural capitulation, Juneteenth became the U.S.'s 11th federal holiday, not counting Inauguration Day and the second explicitly dedicated to American independence. The very name of legislation is incredibly revealing. Referring to the National Independence Day as opposed to the 4th of July, America's original Independence Day, that doesn't enjoy the national language, is semantic manipulation intended to convey that this is the real Independence Day. This bestowal of the honor of Juneteenth is an exercise of refounding the country in accordance to the priorities of the intersectional identitarian left. Direct democracy, expansive legal privileges, and preferential political groups, and weaponization of government, again, bitter clingers, in the pursuit of casting aside the few remaining constitutional and Republican norms of the American founding, such as societal reverence for natural law and federalism. But because most Americans are rightfully skeptical of the people telling them to disregard their traditions and culture, it's why corporate entities must work in union with federal government and monolithically push cultural agendas like Juneteenth. Juneteenth is the direct challenge of the few remaining columns of American civic pantheon. The old traditions of patriotic service and duty are rapidly fading in place, rising in aggressive, ever expanding civil rights regime, maliciously motivated by identitarian grievance that reduces Americans to the sum of their parts while stripping them of their uniqueness as individual actors in our somehow still enduring republic. Hey Vicky T, how you doing, dear? Doing great. An audition. Awesome. I'm celebrating today being cancer free for 25 years. That's awesome, Vicky. Heck yeah. There's something that I actually clap about. Yay. Without her actually surviving such a thing, we wouldn't all be gratefully pleased to actually be her friend. Every race, ethnicity, etc., was enslaved at some point in time in human history. Slavery still exists. There's still slave auctions in Africa and the Middle East. I mean, you can actually go to the point of actually um, thinking about minimum wage in itself is a form of enslavement. Whatever. However you want to actually look at it, yes, all peoples at some point in time in their lives had actually gone to the point of actually, being enslaved. And the majority of them were sold by their own kind. That is a form of enslavement also. Yes. There's so many things to actually think about when you actually think about enslavement, being put in jail and working for pennies on the dollar. Again, a form of enslavement that we still practice to these days. Biden says Juneteenth is about banning books. Of course, Joe Biden says that. That's what Joe Biden has in his head as being the reason for such a day. Though he doesn't hold many things in his head, that's what it was instilled in his head for the day to go and push his ridiculous thoughts. President Joe Biden said Monday that Juneteenth is about reading books, not banning them. It is apparent reference to efforts to ban pornographic books from children's libraries. There's a big, huge issue with that right there. Pornographic books from children's libraries. That in itself, I'm not for banning books. I'm really not. When it actually comes down to it, I have a couple. I have a couple right here. Couple books that have actually been banned in the past. I'm going to start a camera here for you. We'll give myself the screen. Hello, everybody. Look at that. Here you go. Fahrenheit 451. Blood Meridian. 1984. One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Anna Farm. Bunch of banned books. Seriously. Whole ton of banned books. And that's how it works. Sorry, I have to actually turn this camera off. I'd like to leave it on for y'all, but somebody's still awake. Somebody is still awake. So we'll go back to that. Nice set of books. Yeah. Dr. Seuss's Mega Band. Biden has an IQ of a potato. Yes, all of that. Yes. So, when it comes down to it, though, pornographic books in a children's library, I have an issue with that. I really do. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever to put pornographic books in children's libraries. Juneteenth is about Americans feeling the progress we can make for America. It's about remembering history, not erasing it. It's about reading books, not banning them. That's what great nations do. And we are a great nation, the president said in a tweet. Yeah, we once were. We once were a great nation. Now, I'm not so sure about that. Biden has made his fight against book banning as a key part of re-election campaign, featuring a clip from an issue 2024 launch video. The book shows Biden's videos include To Kill a Mockingbird, Kite Runner, Invisible Man, Paradise, The First to Die at the End, Lawn Boy, The Bluest Eye, They Both Die in the End, and Homegoing. Lawn Boy includes depictions of young boys performing oral sex on each other, which The Bluest Eye has sexual themes like incest, rape, and sexual dysfunction. School districts across the country have banned books, but they have deemed to have inappropriate content. But Biden has deemed the bans to be an attack on LGBT community. There shouldn't be an LGBT community for children. I'm just saying, if they feel a way when they're young, maybe they might just feel a little bit different when they actually grow up and they actually finish going through puberty. On June 8th, he said that the Department of Education said it would be appointing a coordinator to address the growing threat that book bans pose for the civil rights of students. The Biden administration has also tied Juneteenth to abortion and voting. Vice President Kamala Harris delivered remarks Tuesday at the Juneteenth concert in South Lawn in the White House, saying, "We must also fight to protect the freedoms already won." Harris said the country needs to fight for voting, which she said is under assault in states across our nation, and to restore the freedom of the right of every woman in every state to make decisions about her own body. But yet that's what they want to actually do away with, is to actually give them the rights to their own body by actually going and implementing such things as allowing abortion in itself, because sorry, the default Catholic of Joe Biden and his ridiculousness with thinking that it's okay to abort babies is contradictory to itself. Juneteenth is a federal holiday is meant to breathe new life into the essence of America, to ensure everyone feels the power of the progress we can make. It marks the long, hard night of slavery, but the promise of that brighter morning to come, Biden said in a separate tweet about the holiday. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Yes, I like I said, I'm totally for not banning books, but allowing pornographic books for children to read, that might be a little far. Might be a little far. Sense of humor is the only way we'll survive this. Yeah, I bet. DNA, dads never abort. That's good. That's a good one. That's a good one. I like that one. Just kind of glancing through chat here real quick. I know there's quite a few there. Hello, Mike Cohagen. How you doing, brother? Good to see you. Good to see you. Glad you're here. We're gonna actually move on to some news. Did anyone else have to read Kite Runner in 9th grade? That was graphic. No, I didn't. I've never actually read Kite Runner, and it's one of those books that's actually in my list of books in my Amazon account that may actually eventually be purchased. We need a time machine to go back and tell Kamala's mom to swallow. Yeah, maybe. It's for the simple-minded. Juneteenth. Yeah. That's an interesting thought. That's an interesting thought. So then, the ignorance of such a day and such a day of celebration for so many comes with other things. So then several people killed, dozens injured during Juneteenth celebration in North Carolina, Illinois, Missouri, Ohio, and Washington turned bloody. Can you imagine which community actually did that to themselves? Happy Juneteenth! Several people were killed and dozens injured on Juneteenth celebrations in North Carolina, Ohio, Missouri, Illinois, and Washington turned bloody As the TGP reported over the weekend, 23 people were shot, one fatally, after the Juneteenth celebration in a strip mall in Willowbrook, Illinois, turned violent. The bloodshed continued across the U.S. 2 people were killed and 3 others were injured in the music festival in Washington state after a person shot randomly into the crowd. A 16-year-old suspect was arrested after shooting at the Juneteenth festival in Asheville, North Carolina. 2 juveniles suffered serious injuries after shots were fired at a festival in Pack Square Park. 1 person was killed and 9 others injured at a Juneteenth celebration in St. Louis. One of the injured were teenagers, a 15-year-old and a 19-year-old. The 17-year-old was killed. A 15-year-old boy was shot in the chest in the Juneteenth celebration in Akron, Ohio, according to WGW. The teen was hospitalized with non-life-threatening wound. You know, it didn't really need to go into detail about, names. Obviously, most of them were teenagers, underage individuals. But I bet we could all, every single one of us, could actually think about this for just a few seconds and actually equate where these happened, and most likely, because it was a Juneteenth celebration, who these people actually consisted of. I mean, any of these places, North Carolina, Ohio, Missouri, Illinois, or Washington, when you actually look at those cities that these actually happened in, you can really kind of extrapolate exactly which quote unquote race most of these actually were. It definitely was white supremacy. Uh, was it? Yeah, no, it was not that 3-letter hard K term. It wasn't them. Liberal white women? I would have been more excited if that was the case. It's so good. Yeah, I love you all so much. That's so funny. But, because Juneteenth is so insignificant in itself, that's all I got for Juneteenth. 24 minutes worth of stuff because it took me 4 minutes to get to start. Too good. Let's move on to some actual news. Should we do that? Everybody okay? Ready for that? Some interesting stuff happened within the last day. So, I know that we kind of covered that Blinken was actually supposed to be in China yesterday, and we explained where he was actually, that he would actually be there today for other meetings. It's been really beautiful to see different religions and cultural groups coming together up here to fight the whole woke agenda targeting kids. Oh, they found fake news. Good news. Fake news? I don't know about fake news. But we'll actually kind of, try to cover news as good as we possibly can. So this is Blinken meets Xi in China, warns U.S. must choose between cooperation or conflict. Yo, what up, Jimmy? Good to see you, brother. I was the Federneck tape. Biden was. I saw the Federneck tape with Biden. It was hilarious. Yeah, I know, right? It was good. U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken met with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Monday as America's top diplomat concluded a flying 2-day visit to Beijing. According to AP, Blinken-Xi meeting had been expected, but neither side had confirmed it would happen until just an hour before the talks, which are seen as key to the success of the trip. News of the diplomatic head to head came after China told the U.S. earlier in the day it must choose between cooperation or conflict, with Beijing as both countries seek to navigate a diplomatic way forward amid fraught relations between the world's two largest economies. Wang Yi, China's highest ranking foreign policy official, told U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in the terms and conditions during his final day of 48-hour trip to the communist country. I'm just going to scroll back up to this photo here real quick. Does he look like he's ready to take a dump? What is he doing? What is this guy right here? Mr. Anthony Blinken. He's like slouched over. Face is all like forced, like he's like ready to actually like physically take a shit. Pants all ruffled. He doesn't even look professional. You know, like when you look at Xi, you know, you look at him and you're just like, yeah, standing straight, clothes all perfect. Yeah, he's a little overweight, but that's what most kings or, dictators look like. They're the ones that are the most well fed. This guy, with him, his angles are all off. Like I said, looks like he's ready to take a dump. The pair spoke for 3 hours on Monday in an ornate state guest house in the ancient Diatal Gardens, according to the State Department of officials cited by AFP. Neither Washington nor Beijing has confirmed a meeting between Blinken and Xi, China's most powerful leader in decades, whose meeting with President Joe Biden in Bali last year raised cautious hopes that for a thaw in the relationship. The current diplomatic push comes amidst fresh allegations of Chinese hackers have launched a broadcast cyber espionage campaign known to conduct by China Nexus threat actor since the mass exploitation of Microsoft Exchange in early 2021. The Secretary of State's trip to Beijing this time comes in critical juncture as China-U.S. relations, Wang told Blinken, according to the readout from Chinese state broadcasters. It is necessary to make a choice between dialogue and confrontation, cooperation, or conflict, he said. We must reverse the downward spiral of China-U.S. relations, push a return to a healthy and stable track, and work together to find the correct way for China and the United States to get along, Wang added. He also issued a warning to Taiwan, the self-ruling democracy claimed that continually threatened by Beijing, while reasserting the communist dictatorship's long-standing claim to vast swaths of the South China Sea. On this issue, China has no room to compromise or concede, Wang told Blinken. The United States must truly adhere to the one China principle confirmed at the 3-point U.S.-China communiques, respect China's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and clearly oppose Taiwan independence. They really seriously are forcing the point that, you don't have a choice. You really don't have a choice when it comes down to it. Do as we say. Allow us to take over the island of Taiwan. Do not try creating any type of war or any sort. Do not come to their aid. Remove your citizenry as soon as possible. Any American national that's there that wants to get out needs to get out and get out now. Otherwise, they may actually be found to actually be captured by China. China really seriously has gone to the point of actually saying this is what they want and this is what they will exactly do. With a name like Wang, I mean, so many jokes. Yeah. Yeah. Flaccid. Uh, I mean, there's so many jokes that you could actually come up with for a name like Wang. But when it comes down to it, what the point is, though, is we're being told to stay out of Taiwan, leave it alone, and let them do what they need to do. I feel bad for Taiwanese. They don't want to be Chinese. Exactly. They don't. They don't want anything to do with it. They want out. They want out as much as they possibly can. Just kind of looking through chat there real quick, making sure I'm not missing anything. It's been their island for centuries, and it's none of our fucking business. I hope we get right in this country. Exactly. We don't need to be interjecting ourselves in everybody else's wars. We really don't. We need to leave it alone. We need to leave it alone for what it is. So it's like for whatever reason, when you read a news article off of one place, you always have to go to the next to actually get more of the story on what this conversation all entailed. There's a lot more to it. Taiwanese is actually offended if you call them Chinese. This is some personal experience from having a few friends from Taiwan. Sure. Makes sense. Makes total sense. China commies can sure think about they can push us all around. Where are you going to get clips from when China takes over Taiwan? Right? So, like I said, sometimes you got to go other places to get the rest of the story. Xi rejects U.S. bid for military crisis hotline. Oh. China's refused to resume direct military communication with Washington despite repeated efforts from Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, the top U.S. diplomat, on June 19th, shortly after meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. While he raised repeatedly the prospect of setting up a crisis communication line between the U.S. and Chinese militaries, at this moment, China has not agreed to move forward with that. Blinken told reporters as a press conference he has wrapped up his 2-day trip to Beijing. I think that's an issue where we have to keep working on, he said. It's very important that we restore those channels. If we agree that we have the responsibility to manage this relationship responsibly, if we agree that it's our mutual interest to make sure that the competitive aspect of the relationship don't veer into conflict, then surely we can agree and see the need for making sure that the channels of communication that were both said are necessary to do and include military to military channels. As bilateral tensions keep rising, Beijing has resisted a consistent U.S. push to open up lines of communications to mitigate the risk of potential flare up. Since 2021, China's leaders have declined or ignored more than a dozen requests to talk with the Pentagon and about 10 working level engagement invitations from the U.S. side, Reuters reported, citing an unnamed senior U.S. defense official. That includes in February after U.S. military jet shot down a Chinese surveillance balloon traversing the United States. Yeah, that balloon that kind of floated over the top of the United States for a few days before they decided to actually go and knock it out. Nothing wrong with letting it fly over the United States before knocking it out. You just let it do its thing. Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu also refused an invitation from formal meeting at the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin in Shangri-La Dialogue Security Forum earlier this month. in this first visit to China as the Secretary of State, which made him the most senior Biden administration official to make such a trip. Blinken held talks with the Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang and Beijing's highest ranking diplomat Wang Yi and had a brief meeting with Xi. Asked why Washington would want to continue engaging with China despite the apparent unwillingness to have open military communications from the other side, Blinken argued that such efforts are necessary to make changes happen. We're not going to have success on every issue between us in any given day, but in a whole variety of areas. On the terms that we set for this trip, we have made progress and we are moving forward, he said, without elaborating any of the specifics. But again, I want to emphasize none of this gets resolved within one visit, one trip, one conversation. It's a process. And my hope and expectation is that we're more engaged in that. Retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General Robert Spalding, now a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, sees a less rosy picture. The Chinese regime, he said, is using a military communication channel as a bargaining chip to get more concessions from the Biden administration. Of course they are. We've been handing out anything and everything that we possibly could to almost anywhere, such as, mainly Ukraine. When you actually look at it, they're like, oh, wait a minute here. If you're so willy-nilly with your stuff and you're just going to hand things out, we're gonna use that as a bargaining chip to actually get more from you before we actually just go ahead and say, okay, well, we'll be friendly for now. We are the ones asking for it, and quite frankly, the only one that gets going to make any kind of military decision is Xi Jinping himself. Essentially, I think we're going for something that the Chinese don't really care about, and so therefore, they're holding it out as a bargaining chip for something they do care about. At the press briefing on June 19th, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre described Blinken's visit as a good step forward. The meeting was constructive, which is important to Americans' interest and important for the American people. We believe it is a good step forward for the secretary to have constructive conversation with President Xi. Of course. Why wouldn't you want to have constructive conversation? You just want to have bullshit conversation? No. She's so stupid. I really hate Karine Jean-Pierre. She's ridiculous. She doesn't speak to any point whatsoever. She sits there and just redirects you and says, well, just go talk to this group, talk to that person, talk to this other, she doesn't do her job. But Spalding said he believes the United States has just really lost the ball on what is important with the relationship. China is trying to strip mine the U.S. economy, and there's no indication that we're actually willing to protect it. He said cutting U.S. supply chain dependence on China and rebuilding U.S. infrastructure and industrial base, he suggested, should instead be a higher priority in managing the relationship with China. A State Department spokesperson referred to the Epoch Times as Blinken's statements when asked about Spalding's remarks. This right here, this U.S. infrastructure and industrial base, when it comes down to it, we don't have a lot of that. A lot of that had already been outsourced, and it's no longer ours. Good night, Rabbit. You have a good one, dear. Sleep well. But U.S. infrastructure and industrial base, we don't really have much of one. Whereas most of the stuff that is actually, we went through this last night, most of the stuff that's actually produced out of China is just that, produced out of China and is shipped across the seas to us. We don't produce our own goods. We don't produce our own. There's so much stuff that we don't produce of our own that we still need. So, we move on just a little bit, and this is where I was saying is we kind of we don't have our own goods, we don't have our own industrial complex to actually build the stuff that we need. U.S.'s electric grid is vulnerable under communist China's threat, says expert. The United States' dependence on Chinese-made extra high voltage transformers is making it easier for China's communist regime to switch off the U.S. power grid and throw the country into chaos, warned Tommy Waller, president of the Center of Security Policy. Extra high voltage transformers are what many experts consider to be the backbone of our modern grid, Waller said in an interview with Epic TV's American Thought Leader program. If this device that we depend on for the lifeblood of our modern civilization was able to be manipulated, if it was able to be turned off, then that could be extremely problematic for us. Says Jen Jiklik. I can't even pronounce that properly. A Marine Corps veteran turned power grid expert, Waller has recently appeared in the Grid Down Power Up, a documentary featuring Dennis Quaid that explores the catastrophic effects of power grid failure would have in the United States. When we say the grid, we're talking about the whole system that generates electricity, transmits it, and distributes it. He explained, noting that the power must be transmitted to extremely high voltages to minimize losses over long distance travel. These extra high voltage transformers are needed to step up the voltage. These assets are absolutely critical. We could take 1 or even 4 years to build just one such transformer, according to Waller. They are also huge and weigh hundreds of tons, meaning that the shipping them across the country isn't easy, and in some cases, specialized rail cars must be used. There's only so many of those assets, and we can't afford to lose these for really any reason, whether it's because they're manufactured with malicious intent or manipulate them if they're attacked in different forms of attacks. China's unrestricted warfare. In 2020, the Wall Street Journal reported that the U.S. officials had seized over 250-ton Chinese-built transformer that suspected had been meddled with and sent it to the U.S. Department of Energy-owned Sandia National Laboratories in New Mexico for inspection. According to the report, officials found electronics that should not have been part of the transformer or hardware backdoors that could secretly allow the Chinese to gain effective control of the transformers. The CCP has been executing unrestricted warfare against the rest of the free world, predominantly the United States. One method of unrestricted warfare is looking for these critical vulnerabilities of the society and figuring out how to exploit those. To exploit America's dependency on overseas-made transformers, China's first embedded itself into the global market for grain-oriented electrical steel, a specialty alloy needed to produce the equipment. China now produces about half of the world's grain-oriented steel. They identified that these transformers need a certain type of steel to be manufactured. So what did the Chinese do? They dumped into the market massive amounts of grain-oriented steel, and they cornered the market for even the precursors of what is needed to create transformers. Waller stated, adding that the U.S. utility industry eventually turned to China for transformers to keep expenses down. Yeah, to keep expenses down. You went to another country to get them to actually produce the good for you? We need to identify where the transformers are and how to get them inspected. Then we need to be able to produce these domestically. If not, have allies produce them and ensure that those allies are not using components that come from communist China. America's policy problem. Recognizing the vulnerability, then President Donald Trump in 2020 issued an executive order declaring a national emergency over threats of the nation's electrical grid. The order essentially banned the purchase of installation of any bulk power electrical equipment designed or built by any company under the control of countries hostile to the United States, including China. In 2021, when President Joe Biden took office, the Trump order was suspended for 90 days, although the prohibitions on Chinese electrical equipment remained in place. In its rationale for signaling out China, Biden's Department of Energy said that it was reason to believe that the government of the People's Republic of China is equipped and actively planning to undermine the bulk power system. Reasons to believe, just simple reasons to believe that this is a potential issue. Nothing big, just small issues. Although when Biden administration is aware of the CCP's threat to the grid, the green energy agenda it is pursuing will not help counter that threat. There will be blackouts if we continue some of the policies that our government has applied upon the nation just due to physics. He said, noting that it's impossible to phase out all traditional gas powered cars and trucks while at the same time replacing large, steady power generators with renewable sources such as solar and wind. Such as solar and wind. Really? That's going to be the actual source of power that we're going to actually go to and say, oh, this is so much more dependable? Wrong. Not going to happen. You're not going to have enough wind or solar panels or any other type of contraption that's going to actually generate enough power for even a nice sized city under these just never going to happen. It's never going to happen. You're never going to have enough to actually continue to power everything that you need to power with those quote unquote green renewable resources. I think about the draw of demand that electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging stations have on our grid. That's going to require a lot more electricity, he said. Yet, because of lots of different government policies, we're shutting down the largest producers of electricity. The reality is that right now, the grid is so vulnerable to some forms of threat that Mother Nature, that even if they deterred all of our human adversaries from taking it down, it's 100% certain at some point the grid will go down because of solar weather. Really? History has already painted a rather grim image of what would happen at large-scale outage. In 1977, New York City went dark after lightning struck power lines, only to be illuminated by fires from widespread arson, looting, and riots. There were more than 4,500 arrests of people who were looting. More than 550 police officers were injured in the line of duty. Over $300 million worth of damage to the city in 24 hours. Waller said, noting that for those living in large cities, it could deprive them of the basic elements necessary to sustain life, from water to food. So every single way that you look at it, modern society is not prepared to live without electricity. So in short order, you have suffering and you have chaos. And then you have societal collapse when we lose portions of our grid, and our enemies know that. Our enemies know that. Our enemies know that most of us are not capable or have the capabilities to actually produce our own electricity in any way, shape, or form, or even take care of ourselves for the most, because it's just not feasible to even do that. It seems as though so many have actually even just lost the ability to even just learn how to sleep under the stars. The world population is going to go down because of the baby boomers are elderly. China's population will massively decline. Massively. And when you actually think about it, when it comes to Yes, the baby boomers are elderly. We also have other reasons, little jabbies that people were given in mass amounts that are also causing significant amounts of death suddenly, anyway. And when we actually look at it and we actually see how that can actually affect us in a whole, there's some massive and major issues that are ready to come at us. Um, they're not really green. No, they're not. I know. They're really not. None of it's green. None of those cars, those electric cars, are the worst. They're ready to actually pollute the earth with as much of lithium as possible after it being mined out by small children. The whole thing, the whole process is just scary in itself that they actually think that that's actually going to be the best for us. Excess deaths across the West, meaning more people are dying. Yes, yes, more people, more and more people. I could do the Amish lifestyle, but summer would suck ass. Yeah, it would. Yeah, it would. I would bet that 30 years that the population around the world will be very small. Uh-huh. Yep, definitely going to be very small. It's just moral fagging. Not sure what you're trying to tell me right there. I'm okay though. Who's that, buddy? Am I still contending with somebody at this point? Is that what's going on? I'm going to try using some resources on this computer that I shouldn't be using. Ricada's live. I see. Not much really going on. It doesn't look like there's anybody else that's really polling audience. I just like to actually kind of glance at, what I'm contending with. Who's running shows, who's not. All right. We'll kind of move on to some other parts of the world that are actually going through some issues. Here you go. Here's one of the headlines. Russian general says U.S. is preparing to use mosquito-filled drones in Ukraine. I'm like, what the hell is this? Mosquito-filled drones? Okay. It sounds kind of dangerous and disrespectful to other people's, but yeah, okay. Let's go ahead and do that. The same Russian general who presented alleged documentation of U.S. biological weapons program in Ukraine now says America is preparing to use drones filled with malaria-infected mosquitoes against Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, Chief of Radiation, Chemical, Biological Defense Forces, and RF Armed Forces, made his claims in a video that is now circulating widely on the social media. The folding of Kherson region planned by Kiev regime can complicate the situation, including arbovirus infections. Kirillov explains in a video, after a drop in the water level, the formation of diseases transmitted by mosquitoes is possible. Kirillov goes on to present alleged documentation that the United States has formulated a plan with partner in Ukraine to use infected vectors through a patented drone designed to spread infected mosquitoes in the air. Although Kirillov allegations may seem somewhat unbelievable, insects have a long and storied history in military operations. In light of publicly available defense advanced project agencies discussing regarding insect allies, certainly not a stretch to surmise the Pentagon might be interested in exploring new methods of utilizing insects in a theater of war, even though the use of etymological weapons is currently prohibited in the Biological and Toxic Weapons Convention of 1972. it could easily be argued that such prohibitions only apply to honest state actors. Nobody follows the rules since the shooting started. Any arguments as to responsibility aside is not as though war crimes haven't been committed in eastern Ukraine. After the recent destruction of Koolfrogg Dam in Kherson, low-lying areas in the eastern side of Dnieper River are flooded and turning into a swamp, leaving the region ripe for a new twist of ancient type of warfare. As both sides of the current conflict struggle to establish dominance without resorting to use of tactical nukes, entomological weapons may present an opportunity for hostile actors to cripple their enemies while simultaneously maintaining the appearance of compliance with international law. As noted by Kirillov, the description of Patton emphasizes that the infected soldier is not able to perform the combat missions assigned to him, such as method of infecting the enemy would have significant effect militarily. So, when you actually think about it, just biological weaponry, when it comes down to it, is actually supposed to be frowned upon in itself and not be used. But they're gonna go ahead and they're gonna actually gather up malaria-ridden mosquitoes and try actually deploying them into areas to actually go after Russian forces. Now, I'm not saying that I'm against it or I'm for it, but when it comes down to it, I always thought that there was this big thing where we actually looked at it as being um, improper to use such a biological weapon. I really don't get it. The drones are mostly surveillance, with some of them have missiles, things that go boom. Of course they do. Of course they do. I have a funny drone story. Not sure if I have shared it before. Prohibited. Hydrogen cyanide is prohibited. Of course it is. There's so many things that are actually prohibited when it comes to actual war, but yet again, it seems as though as we've made it okay. Seems as though as we've made it okay. So there's a couple things to go along with this goings on in Ukraine. Dmitry Trenin, Putin has just revealed Russia's strategy for ending the Ukraine conflict. The situation on the ground is going well for Moscow, but an escalation from the West could push the Kremlin to the extreme. Dmitry Trenin is a research professor in the high school economic and lead research fellow in the Institute of World Economy and International Relations. He is a member of the Russian International Affairs Council. President Vladimir Putin has asked again last Friday in St. Petersburg International Economic Forum about Russia's nuclear strategy. Recently, Moscow began to deploy nuclear weapons to Belarus. Meanwhile, domestically, a public debate has started over the possibility of the first use of nuclear weapons against NATO in the context of ongoing proxy war in Ukraine. Putin's answers brought no surprises. In summary, nuclear weapons remain in the toolbox of Moscow's strategy, and there is a doctrine that stipulates conditions for their use. Should the existence of Russian state be threatened, they will be used. However, there is no need to resort to such instruments currently. For all the expectations in the United States and Western Europe that Russia will suffer a strategic defeat in the conflict, the Pentagon's stated goal, Putin doesn't believe things are moving in that direction. The long-awaited and much advertised Ukrainian counteroffensive is fluttering so far, resulting in heavy losses in Kyiv. The Russian military, for its part, has learned from past mistakes in holding firm. Western deliveries of artillery systems, tanks, and missiles, which Ukrainians hoped would turn into a tide of war, have failed to make the decisive impact. According to Putin, Russia has managed to almost triple its production of arms and munitions and the gathering momentum. Meanwhile, Ukraine's once powerful defense industry has been all but destroyed. After the failure of both Russia's and West's initial move to achieve a quick victory last year, both sides have settled for strategies of attrition. Of attrition, I'm sorry. The US and its allies have banked on tightening economic sanctions in Russia, trying to orchestrate the political isolation of Moscow and hoping that domestic disgruntlement will rise due to the multiple daily privations of mounting war casualties. In principle, this is obvious strategic approach in a long war where success is achieved not so much on the battlefield as by undermining the enemy's rear. The problem for the West is that this is a strategy. This strategy isn't working. Russia has found ways not to only reduce the effect of Western restrictions, but has used them to revive to stimulate domestic production. Indeed, the sanctions have done what many considered impossible. They jolted the country's economy out of the well-trodden path of oil and gas dependency. Russians are relearning to manufacture what they once could but no longer bothered with: passenger planes, trains, ships, and the like, not to speak of garments and furniture. The Russian government has set sights even higher towards regaining the level of technological sovereignty that was abandoned in the wake of the Soviet Union's demise. This is something that the United States needs to actually start thinking about: relearning to manufacture what they once could but no longer bothered with, such as planes, trains, ships, and the like, not to speak of garments. There's so much. There's so much stuff that the United States has actually abandoned and actually just handed over to other countries to actually produce for us. We just take advantage of the situation. Political isolation of the West has weaned Moscow from its traditional fixation of Western Europe and North America and pushed it to discover the wider world of dynamic non-Western nations. It is not just China and India, it's the rest of BRICS, but also the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Turkey. Last week in St. Petersburg, Putin shared the platform with the president of Algeria and received a peace mission of 6 African leaders. Next month, he is hosting the second Russia-Africa summit there. Since the beginning of the year, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has made 3 trips to the continent, visiting a dozen nations in total. In the run-up to presidential elections next spring, Russia's domestic scene is generally calm. Putin is yet to announce his candidacy, but he looks as comfortable as ever. Managing war and peace at the same time, Putin has rejected the option of putting the country on a war footing by means of economic mobilization and autarky. General mobilization and martial law, or suspending elections and rulings by the version of Stalin's wartime State Defense Committee. Instead, he has carefully cultivated the image of calm and normalcy across the country, while confronting the population with the reality of just war on its border. The population has largely adapted to the split reality. More people, according to the public opinion polls, now believe that Russia is winning the war. The fears of wider mobilization have subsided, and some of those who left the country in a hurry last year are coming back. The rifts and crevices of many observers many recently saw in Putin's camp between the Ministry of Defense and the Wagner private military company have been closing, clearly on the president's orders. The liberal opposition can only operate from abroad, which gives them credence to the Kremlin's argument that they are in cahoots with foreign powers to supply weapons to kill Russian soldiers. spectacular provocations from Ukrainians, such as making incursions into the Russian region of Belgorod and shelling border towns and villages, sending drones to Moscow and other cities deep inside the country, and assassination attempts on prominent Russian figures, while raising questions about the holes in the Russian domestic security system, have on balance strengthened the Kremlin's case that the current regime in Kyiv cannot be tolerated. Moscow's emerging long war strategy seeks to play in Russia's strength while exploiting Ukraine's vulnerabilities and the West's limitation. The Kremlin appears confident it can rev up its war industry and still be able to provide for both guns and butter, raise more soldiers through contracts, and fully use its advantages in aircraft and artillery while closing the gaps in drones and communications. It also expects the Ukraine's far higher casualty rate and its soon to become apparent disappointment in its ability to counterattack, despite all the assistance it gets from the West, while will sap the population's confidence in Kyiv's current leadership, most notably personified by President Vladimir Zelensky. The grinding war weighs much more heavily in Ukraine than in Russia. As for the West, it repeats the mantra of supporting Ukraine as long as necessary. The Russian strategy assumes that when Kyiv collapses, it will no longer be deemed necessary. Apart from that, Russians believe that there are two things that Americans and West Europeans are really afraid to continents. One, mainly, as far as the latter is concerned, as a direct collusion with Moscow's army, which would turn Ukraine conflict into a full-blown Russia-NATO war, given the disparities of power, such as a war unlikely to stay conventional for long, leading the Kremlin to reach for nuclear option that its doctrine provides for in the case, particularly for the Americans, is a possibility of European war, provoking a Russia-US nuclear exchange that would destroy the world. Effective deterrence usually combines certainties with uncertainties. The certainty of an adversary's capability to pose an unacceptable threat and the uncertainty of exact measures that it would take if provoked. The U.S. strategy vis-a-vis Russia in Ukraine has been that pushing the envelope further and further by upgrading step-by-step military support for Ukraine and probing Russian reactions to each stage of escalation. So far, it seems for Washington so good. Beyond a certain point, however, such practice may turn to calculated strategy into Russian roulette. The proposed arrival of F-16s and the potential delivery of long-range missiles would bring the situation closer to that point. Hence, Putin's confirmation that the nuclear option, while unnecessary at this stage, is not off the table. Indeed, no nuclear power would likely agree to be defeated by another without exercising the ultimate option. However, let's circle back to the doomsday scenario of where we are today. The Kremlin strategy, it appears, is the chart of the middle course between who would like to freeze the conflict while fixing the gains in the ground, and those who propose to escalate the nuclear first use of path of victory. Unlike those two approaches that seek the early result, the actual course that one can trace with the naked eye, who knows what is hidden from view? Is that a long-term grinding engagement leading to Russia ultimately prevailing due to its greater resources, resilience, and willingness to make sacrifices than the West? Like all strategies built on staying power, this one will be tested at home as much as on the front line. Usually when you think about, people using or countries using nuclear might to actually, go after others, It's usually scare tactics, just to, hey, keep doing what you're doing. And if we feel the need, we will actually go ahead and pull out our nuclear weapons and use them, um, just to so, um, if they gave a fuck about us. Snotty and decided to work in with your hands is beneath us. We because snooty and decided to right here twice. Think you got something else going on over there, Elephant. All makes perfect sense. I mean, I guess, when it comes down to it, it could make perfect sense. Maybe, potentially. Um, here's the problem. Here's the problem right here. They were just talking about, potential Russia NATO or Russia US. And here's NATO saying NATO arsenals empty. So Stoltenberg, not something, they're empty. The US led military bloc NATO needs a more robust industry in order to refill the stock of weaponry and ammunition emptied by the year of supplying Kyiv. The bloc Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said on Monday at an industrial conference in Germany. NATO must continue to support Ukraine as it has done since 2014, Stoltenberg said in the Day of Industry in Berlin, hosted by the Federation of German Industries. We also need more robust defense industry, the Secretary General argued. Our weapons and ammunition stocks are depleted and need to be replenished, not just in Germany, but in many countries across NATO. He added that he met with representative military industry last week and discussed how best to ramp up production and streamline supply chains, added that this was key to sustain our support for Ukraine. We don't have the military might stored any longer. It's been depleted. It's been put into use and unable to reproduce it because, there's a good chance that the reproduction of a lot of that might come out of a country known as China. The NATO Secretary General has repeated an argument that only Ukraine's victory on the battlefield can result in a just and lasting peace. Kyiv's forces has attempted a large-scale offensive in the southern front over the past week, with heavy losses of manpower as well as weaponry provided by the West. Excuse me. The U.S. and its allies have sent over $100 billion worth of weapons, equipment, and ammunition to Kyiv just last year. After the Ukraine conflict escalated, they insist this does not actually make them a party of the hostilities of Russia, though Moscow has repeatedly warned them to that effect. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has accused the West of direct involvement, not just in the weapons deliveries, but also by training Ukrainian troops in the UK, Germany, Italy, and elsewhere. Kyiv has complained that a lot of weapons coming in are in such poor condition they have to be cannibalized for parts. At least a third of Ukraine's military potential is undergoing repairs at any given time, according to the New York Times. So everything that we've actually handed out, everything that we've actually given to Ukraine in itself has been depleted, needs repairs, is undergoing repairs. NATO in itself has no means of production to reproduce any of this stuff, as most countries don't actually produce in mass amounts. So when it comes down to it, maybe some of those factories need to be brought back here to the United States to actually start reproducing some of the goods that are needed for this said war. Otherwise, we could actually run into other issues that are going to allow places like China to prevail over over the West and actually just take us in their own. Well, what up, Shiloh, man? Good to see you, dude. Glad you're here. So I mean, when it comes down to it, NATO is saying they don't have the supply that they're used to, and it looks like it may be empty. Looks like it just may be empty. So then, as we speak of Ukraine, there's this guy, Zelensky, questions U.S. presidential candidates calling the Ukraine peace deal. Are they ready to go to war? He doesn't want this to end. He doesn't want any of this to end. It's going right into his own pocket. And he sees it ending. He can, he gets scared, and he starts, calling out, us and saying, hey, do you want this? You better keep it where it's at. Keep on funding us so that we can continue to do what we're doing. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, on the recent interview with NBC News, pushed back on the comments about Republican politicians who are hesitant to keep bolstering Ukraine's military against Russia. Zelensky joined NBC News to talk about Ukraine's ongoing counteroffensive and his request for additional weapons and aircraft for Ukrainian forces. During Thursday's interview, NBC correspondent Richard Engel asked Zelensky to respond to Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis' characterization of the Ukrainian-Russia conflict as a territorial dispute in fellow Republican candidate Donald Trump vow to quickly end the conflict and sue for peace between the two countries. If any candidate thinks supporting Ukraine is too costly, are they ready to go to war? Are they ready to fight, send their children, die, Zelensky said. They will have to do it anyway if NATO enters this war. And if Ukraine fails and Russia occupies us, they will move onto the Baltics or Poland or some other NATO country, and then the U.S. will have to choose between keeping NATO or entering the war. Zelensky said Ukraine continuing to fight is the benefit of NATO nations like the United States. Keep the money coming, otherwise you're going to be fighting it anyway. What's up, Great Liquor? I see you over there on that Rumble side. I wonder if those candidates realize the price of Ukraine is paying on this war, and Ukrainian president said. Engel asked Zelensky whether he was worried if certain candidates winning the 2024 U.S. presidential election raised concerns for Ukraine. The American people will choose the most worthy president, and we will support this choice, and that's normal and fair. Of course, some statements from representatives of specific groups of politicians calling for diminished support in Ukraine. Yes, that does worry us. I think that the big risk for Ukraine, it's not the person at the top, it's the change in policy we want to avoid. I believe that won't happen. I doubt the policy will actually change. It doesn't matter which one of these which one of anybody actually does get nominated and elected. I really don't see him actually being like, oh, okay, we're just going to step out. Because, dang well, the majority of them are actually making a pretty penny off of what is actually happening. Rather than continuing to arm the fund of Ukraine's military, Trump and DeSantis have both called for peaceful cessation of hostilities. In March, response to the questionnaire from Fox News host Tucker Carlson, DeSantis said to the United States has many pressing national security concerns about becoming further entangled in a territorial dispute between Ukraine and Russia. Is not one of them, and peace should be an objective. Following his initial comments about Ukraine, DeSantis told Fox News host Piers Morgan that the Russian decision to invade Ukraine was wrong and labeled Russian President Vladimir Putin as war criminal, but stood by the position of the United States, should not get further involved in the conflict. DeSantis also questioned the idea that Russia poses a threat beyond Ukraine, chalking up Russia's progress so far in the war is to a loss. I do not think it's going to end with Putin being victorious. I do not think the Ukrainian government is going to be toppled by him, and I think that's a good thing, DeSantis told Morgan. Last month, DeSantis again addressed the Ukraine Russia conflict, reiterating calls of peaceful settlement. Trump has repeatedly called for a peaceful settlement to the conflict, including during the contentious town hall interview with CNN in May, when CNN host Caitlin Collins asked whether he wants Ukraine to win the war. Trump said, I think in terms of getting it settled so we can stop killing all these people, Russians and Ukrainians, I want them to stop dying. Both sides. Both sides. Stop it. Just stop. Stop doing the shit. And that's what he wants. That's exactly what he wants. During the CNN interview, Trump said that he would bring about a peaceful settlement to the war of Ukraine within 24 hours. Trump also refused to call Putin a war criminal, saying that label should be discussed later, but that doing so too soon would make it a lot tougher to make a deal to make things stopped. Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has also called for peaceful conclusion of the war in Ukraine. We will offer to withdraw our troops and nuclear-capable missiles from Russia's borders. Russia will withdraw its troops from Ukraine and guarantee its freedom of independence. Kennedy's campaign website states, United Nations peacekeepers will guarantee peace in the Russian-speaking eastern regions. We will put an end to this war. We will put an end to the suffering in the Ukraine people. That will be the start of broader program of demilitarization of all countries. Trump's 24-hour commitment, he really does have a 24-hour commitment. He actually does say that he'll have it ended immediately. During his interview with NBC, Zelensky also questioned Trump's claim that he would reach a peace agreement within 24 hours. I don't think there's a single person in the world who would convince Putin to end the war. I don't believe that's possible. Ukraine and Russia, Zelensky said that. Of course he said that. He wants the money. He doesn't want this to end. Ukraine and Russia have been at odds since at least 2014, when then Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych was ousted from power. Yanukovych was generally friendly terms with neighboring Russia, and pro-Russian Ukrainians in the eastern Donbass region sought to separate from Ukraine with support from Russia forces with the post-Yanukovych Ukrainian government have been involved in low-level fighting in the Donbass region since then. Putin cited a need to protect these pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine as part of the reason for invading Ukraine in February of last year. Prior to Yanukovych's ouster, Ukraine had also given Russia access to Crimean port of Sevastopol. After Yanukovych's ouster, Russian forces annexed Crimea in relatively minimal resistance, while relatively low-level fighting between separatists and Ukrainian government forces continued in Donbass region throughout his presidency. Trump has said Russia would not have invaded Ukraine the way it did in February of last year had he still been in office. I kind of agree with him. I kind of really do agree with him when it comes down to it. I don't see that actually happening the same way that it did. I think that, things were actually supposed to happen a lot sooner, as the assumption of Hillary Clinton would have actually been put into play. That Trump actually did win in 2016 would have actually taken away from the effect of them actually putting somebody in to do this, to actually go to war with Ukraine and Russia, including the UN, as far as that goes. I don't believe that the UN isn't already been protecting Ukraine as much as it possibly can. and to hold them off from invading any other country. Though they're not, doesn't seem as Russia's interested in any other country at this point. They're only interested in Ukraine and just that Donbass region in itself. They really don't care. It doesn't look like they really care about the rest of the country, other than the fact they're actually, attacking Kyiv for the simple reason that it's the capital city. So you kind of have the tendency to actually do such a thing to keep things going. Give me one moment. All right. So, as far as that goes, uh, between depletion of NATO troops to uh, Zelensky calling out uh, candidates, potential candidates for president or whatever, on what they would actually be able to do or not do to and around Ukraine in itself. It really seriously seems like this isn't going to end anytime soon, and it's going to continue. It's just going to continue to do whatever it's doing. Everybody just all of a sudden stops talking. Why is that? Come on, fill out that chat. Talk to me. Um. So then, to kind of move on to goings on here in the States, there's this guy here. This guy here. So it says, let's brush up on the DOJ's long history of abetting prosecutorial misconduct. So this is actually something that was actually published today. In an analysis of Department of Justice misconduct, the trial of conviction of Republican Senator Ted Stevens casts a long shadow. To some extent, the backlash that Jack Smith has been receiving since the unprecedented indictment of former President Donald Trump is unfair. It's merely a symptom of large problem that predates the promotion of 2010 to helm the Department of Justice's DOJ Public Integrity Section and his more recent assignment as special counsel in the Trump documents case. But the backlash is also predictable as Americans grow increasingly intolerant of what they perceive as two standards of justice. To be clear, all prosecutions involve discretion, and with it comes an obvious peril of having the discretion influenced by bias. Any prosecutor or commentator that says bias doesn't creep into all of these decisions is lying to themselves and you. This is likely where the cries of, but her emails have some merit. The desecration exercised by Hillary Clinton's case of mishandling classified information was entirely different than the Trump's current case. Of course, the fact patterns are different. So there's no common rubric and would allow the direct comparison. But you could easily write up a damning indictment in the Clinton misuse of obstruction. Comey acknowledged the FBI avoided doing that because the election was looming and they didn't want to trigger constitutional crisis because they erroneously assumed she would win. Whether Comey's decision to inject the invented standard of no reasonable prosecutor into the decision about Clinton's case rises to an abuse of prosecutorial discretion remains debatable. Admittedly, he wasn't even a prosecutor, though he did assume the role of interposing himself between the investigation and the DOJ and effectively closed the case instead of referring to the DOJ. In the public perception of the wide swath of America, this unprecedented action by the FBI director was clearly an example of two standards of justice. Attorney General Merrick Garland's decision to charge Trump only increases the two standards course. Questionable track record. In the analysis of DOJ misconduct, One case cast a long shadow: the investigation, trial, conviction of Republican Senator Ted Stevens, the ensuing scandal of misconduct and subsequent dismissal. Of course, the exoneration came only after irreparable damage and reputation was destruction of his political career had already occurred. That his defeat meant a Democrat would represent Alaska in the Senate for first time since 1981 and go to cast a deciding vote for Obamacare only adds the sting to injustice in the eyes of many Americans. The entire prosecution team has replaced after a government whistleblower accused the team of misconduct in the case of eventually dropped at the behest of Attorney General Eric Holder. Amid the scandal, William Welch stepped down as public integrity section chief and moved back to Springfield, Massachusetts before being invited back to Washington a month later by Lanny Breuer, the head of DOJ's criminal division. Breuer, who has previously defended Sandy Berger in stealing an unknown number of classified presidential records from the National Archives, ironically put Welch in charge of investigating the Stopping National Security Leaks. In that role, he is assigned the case of Thomas Drake, the National Security Agency employee, who is charged under 18 U.S.C. 793E, the Espionage Act. That case ultimately pleaded to a misdemeanor amid excruciating criticism in the government's conduct. Investigation in the wake of misconduct. 5 weeks after Stevens' guilty verdict, a whistleblower came forward to allege misconduct on the part of the FBI and DOJ. Judge Sullivan scolded prosecutors for their conduct during the trial and found them in contempt, and in the aftermath ultimately appointed a special prosecutor amid concerns the DOJ was dragging its feet investigating itself. Henry Scholke, a former federal prosecutor and defense attorney with experience overseeing the Senate Ethics Committee investigation into former Republican New York Senator Alphonse D'Amato, was tapped to spearhead the investigation. As his part, Scholke did a thorough job investigating the DOJ and the circumstances surrounding the case. After almost 2.5 years of nearly $1 million, he delivered 500-plus page report described by Pace University School of Law professor Bennett L. Gershman as an extraordinary contribution to criminal procedure. The report was damning. Elephant says, have a good night. You too. Have a good one. And we'll see you around for sure. No other official documentation, investigative study, and criminal prosecution, to my knowledge, has dissected, analyzed, and carefully and thoroughly the sordid and clandestine actions of team of prosecutors who zealously wanted to win a criminal conviction at all costs. In examining this report, one gets the feeling that its investigation and prosecution of Senator Stevens unfolded and the prosecution's theory of guilt unraveled. The prosecutors became indifferent to the defendant guilt of or innocent. They just wanted to convict him. Based on the depositions of prosecutors, their emails, notes, memos, conversations, court filings, transcripts of testimony, and oral arguments, the Scholke report methodically and exhaustively documents the way these prosecutors manipulated flimsy, ambiguous, and unfavorable evidence, systematically concealed exculpatory evidence from the defense and jury, and thwarted defense attempts to locate the evidence in order to convict a United States senator and destroy his career. Ultimately, Scholke wrote, "We do not believe that a criminal contempt prosecution under 18 U.S.C. 401.3 should be initiated against any of the subject government attorneys, but this must be tempered with a narrowness of his role as judge-appointed special counsel. Being appointed by the judge, he could only investigate contempt, not other violations of law. We conclude, however, that the record demonstrates that Judge Sullivan admonished the government to follow the law and did not issue a clear, specific, or unequivocal order such that it would support a finding by district court beyond a reasonable doubt that 18 USC 401.3 had been violated. In other words, the DOJ prosecutors escaped the finding of contempt by Schuelke, and thus only any potential criminal sanction by Judge Sullivan in the technicality, since the judge never entered an explicit order to follow the law. Schuelke did, however, drop the subtle footnote into his final conclusion. We offer no opinion as to whether a prosecution of obstruction of justice under 18 U.S.C. 1503 might lie against one of the more subject attorneys and might meet the standard enunciated on 927 in 9 through 27.220 in the principles of federal prosecution. In 2012 interview with Historical Society of District of Columbia Circuit, Schuelke was less coy. I had concluded that two of the prosecutors who happened to have been assistant U.S. attorney from Alaska and engaged in intentional misconduct and the withholding of two discrete pieces of significant exculpatory evidence, which in my judgment may well have proved to be a difference in the jury who held the case. I concluded from the circumstantial evidence that I believe to be compelling that their conduct in these instances was indeed willful and intentional. Now, I persist in my view, and I think the evidence compels the view that the conduct of these two prosecutors was willful. Regarding the report's footnote about obstruction of justice, Schuelke confessed. That footnote was in there. It was out. It was in. Wow. That footnote was in there. It was out. In was in. It was out because I was back and forth because I had an internal debate about whether this gracious observation of mine was appropriate. Because, of course, when I said I expressed no view about whether such a prosecution would lie, that probably suggested that, in my view, it would, and I ultimately decided to leave it in. Worst track record of probing itself? Since Schuelke was powerless to pursue the obstruction of justice charges at the left up by the DOJ's official professional responsibility to mete out punishment for the conduct of prosecutors in the case, their findings resulted in recommendations for the paltry 40-day suspension for one prosecutor and 15-day suspension for another. Schuelke, in an interview, pulled no punches when it came to the Office of Professional Responsibility. It really seriously seems that we don't go after everybody with the same gloved hand. We really seriously need to start going after everybody the same exact way, and it's not happening. This is now OPR from the last 30 years has enjoyed terrible reputation among practitioners of criminal defense arena. It's a place of popular view where allegations against prosecutors go to die. In my own experience and observations over these last 30 years are consistent with that view. In any number of colleagues at the bar have become familiar with this matter, have observed to me, if that were one of us on the defense side, would be in jail. That's obstruction of justice. They wouldn't hesitate for 10 seconds to prosecute one of us. I subscribe to that view as well. And so I personally found this outcome, while not surprising given the history given the fact that you have an institution investigating its own, disturbing and somewhat surprising because it is a political problem with the Department of Justice. Those scathing comments were made in reference to the modest administrative sanctions of the Office of Professional Responsibility recommended, and before the prosecutors successfully overturned their modest suspension by appealing to U.S. Merit System Protection Board, which affirmed the decision and reversed the suspension based on the harmful procedural error. The MSPB awarded back pay and attorney fees to the prosecutors. The MSPB bills itself as an independent quasi-judicial um, agency, an executive branch that serves as the guardian of federal merit systems. In practice, it serves as congressionally sanctioned job protection racket for federal employees. The swamp protects its own, whether it's prosecutor or public integrity case obstructing justice, getting off scot-free, and a former FBI deputy director fired for lack of candor, getting reinstated and paid $700,000 through a settlement with a subsequent administration, Andrew McCabe, or a convicted FBI Russiagate forger getting reinstated in the DC bar. The message is clear. The system will take care of you as long as you are on the right side of history, one supposes. While some have argued that Stevens' case is a trial run for framing Trump as Russian asset leading up to the 2016 election, it's unclear if they're really that insidious and just emblematic of the overall approach of getting their guy, regardless of the facts. Even more so, it seems that the politician is Republican that pervades the DOJ and FBI. The department willingly finds its own employees merely reckless when destroying a senator by their misconduct, and certain former Secretary of State careless when mismanaging classified information in a way that put it at risk of intercept by foreign hackers. Yet, it insists Trump is willful in his alleged unauthorized retention of national defense information. This only plays into the perception of a two-tiered justice system. One thing is for certain. There's little public evidence to suggest that the Department of Justice has done anything to moderate the historical tendency to approach politically charged cases with an ends justifies the means approach. History will decide if Smith's unprecedented indictment of Trump is another example of overzealous prosecutor weaponizing the justice system, but Stevens' words ring true. For the former president now, as they did to the former senator then, their conduct had consequences for me that they will never realize and can never be reversed. It's really interesting to actually hear such a thing is how they actually treat both sides of the aisle. One side gets treated like it's everything's okay, don't matter, you can do whatever you want, we'll just overlook it, we'll pay you to actually look the other way if we need to. But when it comes to anybody similar to Trump, they're going to go after him as much as they possibly can, over and over again, continuously attacking this man for absolutely no reason, concocting lies per se, of to actually do whatever they can to actually go after him. Nobody in chat? Nobody wants to talk? Really? So then, to stay on with some Trump stuff, that as we move through this, a judge orders Trump lawyers not to share evidence ahead of trial. So now they're telling him that he can't even share anything, with anybody else. He needs to keep it to himself. What are they afraid of? What is it that they're actually afraid of? Former President Donald Trump and his lawyers were ordered on June 19th not to share evidence in Trump's criminal case with any people not involved in the case. Trump co-defendant Walter Nada and their attorneys must not disclose the discovery materials to the public or news media, nor post them in any news or social media platform without the consent of the U.S. government or approval of the court, U.S. Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhart said in the order. Following the charges against Trump and Nada, of multiple crimes, including concealing documents, government officials preparing to hand over discovery materials to the defendant and their representatives. The materials will include testimony given by witnesses and the grand jury that approve the charges and other evidence prosecutors plan to present at trial. The order from Reinhardt, who is appointed by other judges and has criticized Trump for his social media, comes in response for a request for such an order from prosecutors. Great Lookers over on this YouTube side says, "Wake up!" The government said it was ready to provide unclassified materials in defense, but that its disclosure of information could compromise ongoing investigations and make public the identity of people who haven't been charged. As a result, the government proposes protections against the dissemination of discovery materials and the sensitive information that they contain. Special Counsel Jack Smith said in the request, lawyers for Trump and Nauta didn't oppose the motion. According to Smith, the lawyers didn't respond to request for comment. More on order. While Reinhardt said that he may authorize the disclosure of information to certain people, lawyers from the defendants must take steps before disclosing information. Once a person is authorized to receive the information, lawyers must give the person a copy of the June 19th order. The person must sign the agreement to not disseminate the materials he or she receives. The lawyers must keep the copy of each signed agreement. No disclosures is permitted in any individual or entity that has not signed such agreement, except by further order of the court. Potential witnesses and counsel for potential witnesses may be shown copies of the discovery materials as necessary to prepare for the defense, but they may not retain copies without prior permissions of the court. Reinhardt wrote, adding the defendants must also not copy or reproduce the materials unless necessary to prepare for the trial. Reinhardt also ordered the defendants not to retain copies of the materials and said that they can't review the materials unless they're under the direct supervision of defense counsel or a member of the defense counsel's staff. The defendants can take notes while reviewing the materials, but even the notes have to be stored by lawyers, not the defendants themselves. Violations of the order may result in being held in contempt of court or other sanctions, the judge said. Trump was, and that's exactly right there. Violations of this order may result in being held in contempt of court or other sanctions. That's what they want. They want him to actually do that so they can actually find him in contempt of court, which would actually give them reasons to actually charge him with anything whatsoever. They have nothing. They have zero things on this guy, but they're going to actually count the 31 counts and they're going to say, oh, look at all of it. Look at all of it. You did this. They're digging. They're trying to find something, a reason to actually hold this guy in contempt for any reason whatsoever. Trump was charged with 31 counts of violating the Espionage Act and keeping sensitive records, and with 6 other counts for crimes such as obstruction and making false statements. Prosecutors allege that Trump illegally failed to turn over records to the government after he left office January 20th, 2021, and he tried obstructing the investigation into the failure. Trump returned some records, but not all of them, according to the authorities. Trump is also accused of showing the documents to people who lack security clearance, including the writer and publisher. Nauta, a top Trump. Now, I would implore y'all, if you don't believe me when it comes down to any of this, to maybe go look at some other people on the internet. Go look at some other people such as like Nick Recato or Joe Neerman, Good Logic. Go ahead, check them out. Check out what their thoughts, their opinions are actually on this particular issue. And they're going to tell you the same thing that I'm telling you. There's no reason whatsoever for them to continue to do this. They're doing it for no reason whatsoever. Trump had the right to declassify anything that he wanted. He was the president of the United States. It's not up to NARA to actually go ahead and say, oh, what you can and can't declassify. It is up to Trump and Trump alone. Right now, As we speak, it is up to our current resident of the United States. And yes, he has the right to declassify whatever he would like to declassify. Will he? Who knows? Because, he had, a garage full, closet full, business desk full of the same type of forms when he wasn't president. And he didn't have the clearance to actually declassify. Trump had the right to declassify what he wants, and they're going to actually continue to actually try pushing the point that he didn't. Nada, a top Trump aide, assisted in the effort of moving boxes from one point, falsely told the FBI agents that he didn't know where the boxes had been stored, according to the indictment. Trump has said that he is innocent. A lawyer of Nada previously declined to comment on the charges. Early order. Trump is also facing felony charges in New York. I don't care about the New York one. I think that is really going to actually be an issue in itself, and Bragg is actually going to have some issues here in the near future. When I say here in the near future, DA Alvin Bragg sued after refusing to release Trump case records. Do your job and do it correctly. Quit being as corrupt as you possibly can and thinking that it's okay. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg was sued by a conservative organization in the bid to turn over prosecution records relating to the cases against former President Donald Trump, who was arrested in multiple counts earlier this year. The Heritage Foundation's think tank filed 2 Freedom of Information law lawsuits against the Manhattan prosecutor, alleging that he and his office coordinated with Rep. Daniel Goldman, the White House, and the Department of Justice about the prosecution targeting Trump. Regrettably, these questions have not been met with answers. These reports have raised concern of many circles based on the large part upon the long-standing history of President Trump's political opponents coordinating their activities and systemically weaponize the criminal justice system against him and thereby pervert the course of justice. The second lawsuit filed with the conservative Washington-based think tank also claimed that Bragg retained pro bono assistance from top law firms in connection with the Trump case. They are asking a court to release requested documents in the public under the New York Freedom of Information law and declare that Bragg hand over the documents. The Epoch Times has contacted Bragg's office in the Heritage Foundation for comment on the lawsuit. Mike Howell, director of Heritage Oversight Group, told Fox News that the organization suspects that Bragg was coordinating with otherwise communicating with opponents of Trump, adding that there are reason to believe that Bragg is a prolific communicator via his phone. The fact we have to file a lawsuit against Bragg, who says he can't produce these records and says he doesn't have the systems to do so, is proof positive of another dual standard justice at play in this country. Howell said, "You have a weaponized actor who's going after the former president in a loony theory about a document retention, whereas the DA can't even keep his own documents in its violation of information laws he is bound by." He continued, the lawsuit further alleges that Bragg hasn't responded to requests of communication between Bragg or his office and the parties. Heritage stated that it has the right to see those communications under New York's Freedom of Information law. Neither Trump nor his lawyers have yet to respond to the lawsuit. Bragg's office also has not made any public remarks. Responding to the Heritage lawsuit, the spokesperson for the Bragg's office told the New York Post on Friday will decline to comment and respond in court papers. In the meantime, Trump's lawyers are trying to move to the case of federal court of demanding that New York Supreme Court Justice Juan Merchan recuse himself. Lawyers of the former president on Friday filed a motion asking the case to be transferred to federal level, saying that the alleged crimes relating to the 2016 election and his campaign took place while the president was in office. I'm not sure about that. According to Bragg's office, the crux of the case was purportedly illegal scheming of largely perpetrated before a defendant became president, such as alleged scheme, albeit non-existent, could only violate federal, not state campaign finance laws, as made clear by both the federal jurisprudence and the New York State Election Board. Merchan, who has been often criticized by Trump, as stated in the case, will head to trial on March 25th, 2024, which would be in the middle of the 2024 GOP primary campaign. A hearing in the case was scheduled for June 27th. And of course, they want to actually hold it right in the middle of the primaries. Why wouldn't they want to put it right in the middle of the primaries? They want to actually throw this guy off as far as they possibly can. They don't want Trump in there. They're going to do whatever they can to continue to go after him over and over again. I'll call it out like I have so many other times. Uncooked box of macaroni, you're going to throw it against the wall and see what doesn't actually stick. Zero things have actually stuck, and I believe that they did it yet one more time, and they're going to continue to fail. In the case, Trump is charged with 34 counts of allegedly falsifying business records and reportedly hid payments made during the 2016 campaign via former lawyer Michael Cohen, and now disbarred lawyer who served time in federal prison, was allegedly reimbursed $130,000 for his payments to Stormy Daniels to prevent her from going public with claims made about Trump, which happens like 10 years before that. The former president is denied any affair with Daniels, the adult film actress whose real name is Stephanie Clifford. In a court appearance earlier this year, Trump pleaded not guilty to the charges in a separate case brought by federal special counsel Jack Smith. Trump is arrested in a Miami court last week over charges stemming from whether he allegedly mishandled classified documents. Trump also pleaded not guilty to the counts, arguing that Bragg's and Justice Department's case is designed to politically wound him before the 2024 election. On Monday, Trump wrote the Truth Social that the cases against him will go down in biggest disgrace in American history, even bigger than Russia hoax. If you don't have honest elections, you don't have a country. And I totally agree with him when it comes down to it. You really seriously, this country's been held at the stake, and now we get to actually look at Alvin Bragg being sued for continuing to do what he's been doing and bringing up, ridiculous charges against this current president. Or I'm sorry, the previous president, not the current. Where are we at? We're at the 2-hour mark. I do have quite a few articles actually sitting here. Let's see here. I'm going to kind of skip a couple of these. Kind of hit on this Biden thing for a moment. Scale of Biden's illegal payment scandal triples overnight when the emperor wears no clothes. Those who praise his regal attire attempt to bury the truth in the rags and lies. Joe Biden is the would-be emperor. Those who praise him seek to bury the truth to maintain the false reality, but will they risk standing naked in front of the truth along with the emperor? GOP-led House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer doesn't think so. In an interview with Maria Bartiromo on Fox News, the congressman from Kentucky claimed that $20 to $30 million in illicit payments had been made to the Biden crime family. If this is true, or even if it's probably true, mainstream media, deep state bureaucrats, and whoever else seeks to cover for Biden at the expense of Donald Trump will sooner or later either have to put down their swords or fall on them. Citizens Free Press posted Coomer's Fox interview with the caption, "James Coomer expects to uncover $20 to $30 million in illicit payments made to the Biden crime family. That's up to the triple the amount claiming earlier by the GOP panel." They were actually just saying 5, and now they're saying 10 to 20, 20 to 30. Amazing amount of money that has been actually, pushed through this into this current president that we're actually, looking at as being just a potato. If this is all true, Bartiromo asked Coomer about sitting president when he was vice president, influence peddling, accepting money from foreign nationals, so that he could turn around and make changes in policy for America so he could pocket the money. If that's true, why isn't he impeached already? The short answer is that it is yet to be proven to be true. Coomer, Senator Chuck Grassley, and the company are working on it, but it's not as easy as it should be. The FBI, to understate the matter, is not being forthright. Bartiromo continued, and if it's true that the FBI is doing nothing about it, why isn't Christopher Wray on his heels as well? The assertion that the FBI is doing nothing about it is demonstrably not true. The FBI is being actively working to stall the House Oversight Committee by refusing to hand over documentary evidence. Coomer responded to Bartiromo's second question by telling her Wray is not in control of the FBI. One thing that I've learned from dealing with Grassley's whistleblowers is that this is an organization in disarray. No one has confidence in leadership at the top. You have bureaucrats, deep state bureaucrats who are running the show. They're partisan. They want to get Donald Trump. They don't care what Joe Biden does because Joe Biden can be controlled. I like James Coomer. He tells it like it is. That's rare for a politician. For anyone with eyes to see, it has been plain in some time now that Joe Biden is not calling the shots in the White House. There's plenty of speculation about George Soros, Davos, and China. But the only clear thing is the deep state is real. They are in control, and they are deathly afraid of Donald Trump. It really does seem that way. It really does seem that they're so afraid of him. They're so scared of what he can actually do to uncover any and all things that have actually been going on with and around this Biden family and all of their hoaxes and collusions and whatever else that they've actually been, pushing. That they want to continue to actually go after Trump so that way they can actually say, hey, look over here. Don't pay attention to what's exactly happening. The evidence for this is clear and compelling. The Russian collusion hoax, 2 impeachments, the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, the FBI raid in Mar-a-Lago, and the list continues to grow. And to further the cause, the deep state, and this includes mainstream media, is providing cover for Joe Biden, at least for now. As far as the deep state is concerned, Joe Biden is no more than useful idiot. Lenin reputedly coined the term of label Western intellectual defenders as communism. Biden is no intellectual, but he thinks he is, just like the thousands of leftist ideologues dug in deep at our universities and government offices. Idiots have a bad habit of eating their own. Coomer knows this, and he's happy to let them do it. That's why he told Bartiromo that the investigation is following the money, and that's what it will continue to do. He's going after the bank records and other concrete information related to the funds being transferred from foreign nationals and other countries into Biden accounts. Money talks. Coomer told Bartiromo, this is going to be hard for Joe Biden to explain, and it's not going to go away. I think eventually the mainstream media will turn on Joe Biden and start asking for the real questions. Um, when will the reckoning happen? It depends on what hard evidence Coomer and company have come up with. The left are masters of smoke screens, but a good bloodhound can sniff through the smoke. Coomer appears to confident that he can and will overcome $20 to $30 million in illicit payments made to the Biden crime family. Time will tell. Whatever the case, Emperor Biden is looking more and more like a naked old man shivering under a cold light. Why else would the snap at the reporter asking him for alleged Ukraine bribery scheme? Why do you ask such a dumb question? In another instance, Biden responded with, "Where's the money?" when confronted about the alleged bribery scheme. Well, wherever you decided to put it is my thought. Where's the money? That's what Coomer wants to know, and he's determined to sniff it out. This article appeared originally on the Western Journal. Of course it did. So then, it's kind of, let's lighten it up just a touch here. We'll lighten it up, and we'll still talk about Joe Biden. A Democrat rep physically pulls Joe Biden across the stage after his speech in California. Joe Biden on Monday traveled to Santa Clara, California, to deliver remarks on non-existent climate change and so-called good-paying clean energy jobs. California Governor Gavin Newsom and Democratic Rep Anna Azu joined Joe Biden in the nature preserve of Palo Alto. Joe Biden announced the more than $600 million in climate projects. Biden's cognitive decline was in full display. The 80-year-old forgot what year it is. He commented that by 2020, he'll have conserved 30% of the lands and waters. So it literally pulled Joe Biden across the stage with attendees embarrassing. Watch. Drag him across the floor, grab him by his hand, don't let go, and just go. Just walk. Continue to walk. So you pull that back. You can see how ridiculous this is, that she won't let go of his hand. It's like she's leading her dog down the street. Disgusting. So then I'm actually closing out some of the stuff that I actually had up here because I'm just like, okay, this is too much. We're already over to the 2-hour mark, and by the time we hit the 3-hour mark, I would run out of. We should probably go almost to 4 with all the stuff that I have up here. I'm not doing 4 hours. Some of these I'm going to actually keep, though. Sorry, I'll be right with you. Come on, Grandpa, 4 more years. Exactly. SBF is donating to the right group, and yes, that's sarcasm. Yeah, some of these things are just like, it's okay. It's just too much. So the other day I was sitting around. Because I'm from Minnesota, I was sitting around and I pick up Minnesota crime news, whatever, and it actually comes across my YouTube. And there was an accident. There was a massive accident. A car that was flying down the highway decided to take local streets at high speeds, running into another car that killed everybody in the car. Little information came out about it. So it's the son of far-left Minnesota Democrat accused of killing 5 in deadly crash. the son of far-left former state representative of Minnesota, is accused of crashing into a vehicle at very high speed, killing 5 young women, and then fled the scene before being arrested. The incident began when Derek John Thompson, the son of former Rep. John Thompson, fled the Minnesota State Trooper, who was positioned on the highway and noticed his speeding vehicle. Thompson immediately exited the highway before the traffic stop could be initiated. He then ran the red light at the intersection, crashing into a car occupied by 5 women, who were all pronounced dead at the scene, according to the Alpha News. The victims, which we don't really need to actually name out, it's not something that's necessary. Video of the crash was obtained by Alpha News, showing how devastating the moment of impact actually was. So then you can actually see here how fast he runs through this and smashes into this car, causing sparks to fly. Immediately, he smashed into this car so dang hard at such a high speed that it ended these women's lives. And you can see once he hits his back end, it's not him that's sparking, it's the car that he hit. His back end is off the ground. It's off the ground. 4 more hours? I'm not going 4 more hours. No way. No way. It's scary and disturbing in itself that it actually just so happens to be an ex-representative, his son, that actually goes ahead and does such a thing. Go figure, it was a far left group, our representative's son, so maybe his son will just be looked at like, oh, it's okay. That's so dangerous. And it's ridiculous that you can see how fast. There's no way the guy was going anything slower than 90. I swear to God. Very dangerous and scary to actually think about. Here, this one was actually in the headlines of today's show. Tourist submarine goes missing during Titanic expedition rescue mission ongoing. So this is a tourist submarine has gone missing in exploring the Titanic's shipwreck in the Atlantic Ocean. The U.S. Coast Guard has confirmed. The Boston Coast Guard told BBC News that the search for rescue operation was underway at a small submersible craft, which takes tourists to view the famous shipwreck 370 miles off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada. The Coast Guard said the C-130 search and rescue aircraft has been deployed, assisted by a P-8 Poseidon aircraft in the Halifax Rescue Coordination Center that is equipped with underwater detection capabilities. The submersible is owned by OceanGate Expeditions, a company that offers guided tours of the world's most famous shipwreck. More than 1,500 of the British ocean liner's Titanic's 2,240 passengers and crew perished when the ship crashed into an iceberg and sank April 14, 1912, during this maiden voyage from Southampton, UK to New York. Missing, OceanGate Expedition confirmed that a statement that it owned the missing submersible and that 5 people were on board. We're exploring and mobilizing all options to bring the crew back safely. Now, I don't really know exactly everything that goes along with submersibles and submarines, but when it comes down to it, you'd think that these only have the capability of holding so much oxygen or producing so much oxygen before they would actually have issues potentially. Like I said, I don't know. I could be totally wrong. But when it comes down to it, where are these people? Are they still alive? Did somebody that was in this actually take over the submersible and actually go ahead and take this off course? Our entire focus is on the crew members of the submersible and their families. We're deeply thankful for the extensive assistance we received from several government agencies and deep sea companies in our efforts to reestablish contact with the submersible. We're working towards safe return of the crew members. Submersible is a Cyclops class vehicle designed to take 5 people to a maximum depth of 13,100 feet. Usually, a tour guide accompanies the pilot and 3 passengers in a 22-foot carbon fiber vessel. The company charged $250,000 for a 10-day Titanic excursion, which includes 8 days at sea. Because of the depths involved, each dive to the wreck included descent and ascent. Compression and decompression reportedly takes around 8 hours in total. The wreck of luxury ship, which had been claimed to be unsinkable, has long been an object of fascination. This fascination only grew stronger after the shipwreck was discovered some 12,500 feet under the North Atlantic in 1985. A stunning full-size digitized scan of the wreck was completed only last month, revealing the ship's distinctive bow, as well as details of the grand staircase and even the serial number of one of the ship's propellers. Kind of scary to actually think that this has actually happened. That there's a submersible that has actually gone to go actually look at the Titanic in itself, being underneath the water for so many years, to actually go missing. Let's hope that everybody that was aboard that is actually safe and can be brought back to their families. Let's see here. Oh, this is freaking hilarious. We're gonna actually move on to some funny news as of just doing serious politics. Here we go. Americans Medical Association claims BMI is racist and should not be used due to the origins of the 19th century white body standards. Because this 35 greater than, is totally healthy. So healthy. The American Medical Association, AMA, one of the country's largest medical organizations, has now jumped on the bandwagon of wokeness by labeling the body mass index as racist. The Association of Art has argued that BMI is a troubled past with roots of racist exclusion and historic harm. It is thus an imperfect tool in evaluating the individual's health status. In its annual conference, the AMA decided to adopt a new policy. Stat News reported BMI cutoffs are based primarily on data collected from previous generations of non-Hispanic white populations and does not consider a person's gender or ethnicity, the policy stated. Daily Mail reported body mass index divides by the white man considered white bodies is measured by dividing a person's weight in kilograms or pounds by the square of the height and the meters of the feet in the deeply ingrained in medical system and is a way of measuring population health more broadly. But in an individual level, BMI does not take into consideration relative body shape and how fat is stored. For instance, Asian people who fall within a healthy BMI range are still at high risk for diabetes. Meanwhile, Black women tend to store fat around their hips and legs, whereas white women tend to store it around their midriff, which is more dangerous to their health, even though both may have a similar BMI. I would still say that it's probably just as dangerous no matter where the fat is actually stored on your body. When you have that much fat on your body, you might just want to go for a walk. The medical body voted last week to recommend the physicians take into consideration more than the ratio of a person's height to their weight. Instead, measure a person's visceral fat, considered to be the riskiest type that accumulates around the organs, the percentage of fat, bone, and muscle in one's body, and genetic and metabolic factors such as abnormal blood sugar levels. The AMA Council of Science and Public Health said our AMA recognizes the issues of using body mass index as a measurement because of the eugenics behind the history of BMI, of the use of BMI for racist exclusion. BMI cutoffs are based on imagined ideal Caucasian and does not consider a person's gender or ethnicity. BMI is simple ratio of weight to height used to categorize I don't really need to read any more of this, do I? For them to actually go to the point of actually trying to state that body mass index is racist is wrong. I don't care where the fat is stored. When you have that much fat stored on your body, in and around organs, around your waist, around your hips, around your arms, it usually doesn't pick and choose where it's going to actually go and actually build up. It doesn't just us and be like, oh, I'm only going to go to your ass and I'm not going to go to anywhere else on your body. You're going to be skinny everywhere else. Wrong. If you're fat, you're fat. Me? Yeah, I'm overweight. I'm probably sitting in this yellow range. As far as that goes, should I be working out more? I freaking walk every day and I eat decent meals, so as far as that goes, just the elimination of sugar in itself will actually take care of majority of those issues that so many people in the United States consume in mass amount. Let's see here. Oh, this guy. Let's do this one first. So we kind of covered this story the other day to a point. It says families disgusted remains of deceased loved ones might have been sold black market in Harvard Medical School scandal. Families were disgusted to learn the remains of their deceased loved ones may have been sold in the black market following reports of former Harvard Medical School morgue manager and 6 others were arrested for allegedly running an underground human remains trafficking operation. We went through this. We were actually talked about this, and we actually spoke of the situation and the issue in and around it or whatever of the disgustingness of purchasing such a thing and then reselling it to somebody else to sell it to somebody else. What are they actually doing with it, and why are they continuing to do this? Well, now and you get people that are actually disturbed and disgusted that their family's human remains actually hit this black market. It's actually eugenics when you classify things such as race, idiocracy. It is. I dropped 15 pounds right away when I stopped drinking soda. Yes, exactly. Caffeine and sugar are horrible. They're the worst things for you. They are the worst drug in the world, in my opinion. What's the background? So we'll try staying with this here. So it says, what's the background? Last week, 7 individuals were charged for allegedly stealing human remains from mortuaries to sell them online. Cedric Lodge, 55, previously worked at Harvard Medical School's morgue manager from 2018 through 2022. According to the FBI, he stole body parts from cadavers donated to medical research. Harvard Medical School released a statement last week calling the alleged actions an abhorrent betrayal. We are appalled to learn that something so disturbing could happen on campus, a community dedicated to healing and serving others in school. The reported incident and betrayal of the HMS, and most importantly, each of the individuals who altruistically chose to will their bodies to HMS through the anatomical gift program to advance medical education and research. Families respond. Jack Porter, a research associate with Harvard, reacted to a letter from a medical school informing him that his late wife's remains may have been stolen or sold. If I was Jack Porter, I'd be irate. I'd be going after any and everybody that I possibly could for the mishandling of my wife's remains. According to Porter, the Dean of Facilities and Medicine of Harvard Medical School, Dr. George Daly, wrote, "We have been working with the information supplied by federal authorities and examining our records, particularly the logs showing when donor remains were sent to cremated and when Lodge was on campus, to try to determine which donors may have been impacted. At this time, we cannot rule out the potential that Rail Porter's remains may have been impacted," and the letter stated, according to Porter. Porter told the Boston Herald, "What bothers me is that there's somebody in some basement somewhere in the country or elsewhere fondling my wife's body parts. It could be her brain, her skin, her bones. It's disgusting, and this is why there should be a severe punishment." Porter's wife passed away due to colon cancer in late 2017. Her body is donated to science and placed in custody of a Harvard Medical School. Porter received his wife's cremated remains in 2019, but now he is unsure whether some of her remains were stolen. "I believe that they can recover some of these parts," he said. "All of us who are family members believe it is a horrible thing that happened." When asked what would say the alleged criminals, Porter told WBTS CD, "I would say you guys are sick. You've got to look at yourself and face your family and friends, and you are going to be ostracized for the rest of your life. It's so deviant. I just pity the person. I don't have any anger against them. I just pity them for what they did." Paula Peltnovich also informed that her deceased father's remains were stolen and sold in the black market. Now she's demanding that the medical school return her mother's remains. Peltovich told the Boston Globe, "We were just disgusted, sick like we are going to throw up. It's just unthinkable. There's no words." According to a Harvard employee, many of the families who were informed their loved ones' remains might have been stolen or sold were so upset to speak publicly, the Boston Herald reported. Most of the families are in deep anger and deep anguish. This case is about getting to the truth and what happened there, how it could be, how it could happen for such a long time, how it could happen to an apparent minimal oversight, and how the manager of a morgue had apparent free reign to operate without oversight. We hope to bring to these families by filling the lawsuit a second closure. Disgusting. Disgusting. Feel bad for these families that have actually gone through this. The families that have actually been told that their potential, that some of their body parts of their family members may have actually been sold on a black market. To actually hear such a thing, to hear that would actually seriously just disrupt so many things. So I need to actually talk about this guy. It really disturbs me to actually think that, somebody would actually go to the point of doing such a thing. I had brought it up earlier today in Discord, and it's disturbing. This is horrible. Ohio father murders 3 sons in cold-blooded execution style. In a chilling turn of events, 32-year-old father Chad Dorman from Monroe Township in Ohio has confessed to the execution-style killing of 3 young sons with a rifle. The gruesome event unfolded on Thursday afternoon in Monroe Township at the neighborhood of L'Oreal-Lindolph Road. The Clermont County Sheriff's Office received a chilling 911 call from the children's mother, who was screaming that her babies had been shot. Shortly after, another 911 call was made by a passerby and reported a young girl running down the street, hysterically claiming that her father was killing everyone. The slain boys, aged 3, 4, and 7, are reportedly lined up in their home before being shot by their father. Prosecutors revealed during Dorman's Friday morning arraignment that one of the kids attempted to escape into a nearby field, only to be ruthlessly chased down by Dorman, dragged back into the house, and then shot. The dispatch deputies arrived at the scene to find 3 young boys aged 3, 4, and 7 lying outside their home unresponsive with gunshot wounds. Despite the deputies' immediate life-saving attempts, all 3 boys succumbed to their injuries on the spot. The mother of the slain children, who remains unidentified, was found outside the home with a gunshot wound to her hand. It is believed that she sustained this injury while attempting to protect her sons from their father. She was immediately transported to University of Cincinnati Medical Center, and her injuries are not considered life-threatening. Dorman is sitting outside their home with a rifle next to him. I'm not going to watch the video because it is, kind of explicit in itself, and I really just don't want to actually. If you want to actually see that, I'd implore you to go check it out. It says Chad's father, Keith Dorman, spoke out about the horrific incident. He said that he was both angered and stunned by his son's alleged actions, yet he also defended his character, believing that something tragic had happened to him. In a phone interview with WCPO 9, Keith expresses disbelief in the character of the man presented in the arraignment. This is completely out of character for Chad, he said, adding that his son isn't the violent person. I don't know what went into the personal life. It's a shocker for us. We didn't see it coming. He just snapped. I could tell in his eyes. He's hollow inside, Keith continued, as he struggled to reconcile the image of his son with the crime he was accused of committing. That wasn't Chad standing in the arraignment. I mean, that was not him. Contradicting Keith Dorman's description of his son, Assistant Claremont County Prosecutor David Gass offered a different perspective in the court on Friday. The motive was not released due to an ongoing investigation. During Dorman's court hearing, the prosecution asked for a $20 million bond, and the highest ever sought in Claremont County. The request was granted by Judge J.C. Nagel, reflecting the severity of the crime committed. Claremont County prosecutors Mark Tekulve expressed his disgust in the crime, stating, "This is by far the most sickening, horrifying crime I have seen. I can only imagine the terror these little boys felt and experienced as their father, their protector, was murdering them." As legal proceedings continue, the prosecution is reviewing all possible charges, vowing to ensure that Dorman never sees the light of day again. A fundraising campaign was created by the mother's sister, Rachel Brown, to help the family financially. Nearly $171,000 has been donated to the cause as of this writing. You can donate here. There's a link in this article. Rest in peace to the little angels. These 3 sweet little boys just taken out by their father. Just seriously, this is stated today, but when this actually occurred, the date that it actually happened, Father's Day. Of all days to actually choose. It's sad. What's up, Axiom? How you doing? What? It's really not, and I have. It's all edited. I don't know if that's from a previous article or if that's from what I had just read off. But prayers to the young lady that actually was the mother to these children. Her life will never, ever be the same ever again because of the ignorance of that man. deciding to actually do what he had actually done to those poor children. Canada wildfires. It's not graphic. I looked at it in itself to actually see how graphic it really was. It looked like they had big, huge black redacted, blocks over the top of the most of it or whatever. So you really couldn't see much. It's still not going to play it on YouTube, just because I'm not going to try crossing that line. Yeah, I know. I've seen it. It's still sad. It's still sad. So then, Canadian wildfires continuing to engulf the U.S. So you can see here, this is still New York. This is a satellite image shared Sunday, shows an extent of which Canadian wildfire smoke continues to engulf the U.S. When you actually look at it, you can see cloud cover, but you can see this haze that's underneath, that's covering, the whole eastern side of the United States. Feel bad for anybody that it's actually living in and around these areas, regions, and dealing with such a thing. Breathing any of this in can actually be very dangerous to your health. Everybody that does live in those areas that are dealing with this, you can actually, most of Canada's, dealing with it, and it's as dangerous and scary in itself to think that they're, ignorantly going along with this and just, playing it off as there was nothing that actually happened. It was just all random fires that, started themselves. Hopefully they actually come up with the person that actually decided to, do a lot of this, Trudeau. And maybe, just maybe, they can actually pay for their mistakes. And this, when you see this orange haze and you smell campfire in mass like that, that's very dangerous. It's very dangerous for many people's health. So let's lighten it up a little bit before we actually leave. We'll lighten it up just a touch. Right? What the fuck? I found this cute, and I figured, hey, that would be a good way to actually end the show, is with that. So it says, little bro leaves big bro heartbroken over foul ball during Red Sox game, gets signed merchandise for from Kenley Jansen. So this is, seriously, how can you not be romantic about baseball? We all love viral moments, in Sunday's game between the New York Yankees and Boston Red Sox gave us exactly that via a classic exchange between a dad and his two sons while watching in the stands. It was absolutely tailor-made for Father's Day. While Father Pat Mulligan and his two children, Jack and Charlie, were enjoying the rivalry game on Fenway Park, a cool fan decided to give the family a foul ball, handing it to the youngest son. At first, it appeared to be a sweet moment that the father could share with his kids as they were getting an official piece of MLB merchandise, but the moment quickly evaporated as little Charlie decided to throw the ball back on the field, which sent big brother Jack into a complete frenzy. This
never to be forgotten. So look at this. Oh, sick.
Hands the ball. And Dad's like, no, don't throw it.
So, yeah. Oh, did you see big?
And you see the big brother. he gets immediately just,
bro. Oh no, he is beside himself. Oh, I feel it. I feel that pain. Oh,
it's so cute, so funny, and probably a good way to actually end the night, as opposed to any of those horrible stories that I had just told beforehand. It says, luckily, the Mulligan family didn't end up empty-handed. The Red Sox pitcher Kenley Jansen heard about what happened. While the Mulligans were being interviewed in a follow-up interview, Jack revealed that Jansen gave them both a signed ball and jersey for all the thankfully temporary sadness Pat also let them know that Charlie got so excited about being given a ball that he couldn't help but give it a good throw. So cute, so fun. We'll play that again.
This. Oh, sick. See ya. Oh, did you see Big Bro? Oh, no. He is beside himself. Oh, I feel it. I feel that pain. Oh.
So cute, so fun. All that being said, thank you all so very much for joining me here tonight. We'll try coming back again tomorrow night. I'm in the works of trying to actually set up some other shows per se, do some recordings and release them for different time frames of the day to see what kind of people I can actually attract to premieres. We'll see if that can actually happen here sometime soon. Keep an eye on that, and pay attention. You might be surprised if it comes out in the near future. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like button. Rumble, hit that thumbs up button. Take the link, share it somewhere. Share it to some form of social media that you prefer, and let all your friends know where you hang out. If you liked what you've seen, be sure to hit that thumbs up button or that like button. If you don't like what you've seen, just hit the like button anyway, and go ahead and leave a comment down below and let me know exactly what you'd like to see me do different. Thank you all so very much. Love you. Later.
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.